So while you're here, if you have little things that take you out of your comfort zone, for example, the chairs are quite close together. So you may find, this isn't so comfortable. I came in this afternoon and I tried the chairs. And I sat next to someone. I just wanted to see what it feels like. And it could take you just a little bit out of your comfort zone. And you could say, I wish I had more space, but you don't. And here you can start with little things like that. That's just what is in the present moment. If your mind comments on it and says, this isn't how it should be, then you can see that ultimately is what takes you out of the comfort zone. It's not the fact that there is not that much room on the left and your right, that the ultimate comfort zone is the physical. There's a physical element to it, yes, but there is a larger element to it that is mental, that is the mind. So in many, many situations, when you're taken out of your comfort zone, the physical element there may be some where the physical is very strong, but in many other situations, the physical element where something that's actually happening is not the main thing that takes you out of the comfort zone. It's the mind, the mental commentary about what's going on, that really brings about this state of frustration, of anger, of resentment, of complaining, of wanting to argue. And if you cannot tell the difference between what it is that causes your frustration and your unhappiness, is it the situation? And I've often said it, but I'm not the first person to say it. I believe the first person was probably the little-known philosopher Epictetus, who lived like 2,000 years ago. And he was the first to literally point out, look at when you're unhappy, are you unhappy because of what's going on? Or are you unhappy because of what your mind is telling you about what's going on? And that is such a fundamental truth that even nowadays, millions on the planet have no idea of that, how powerful that realization could be to transform your life. This one realization that a large part of your happiness, the greater part of your happiness, is not caused by situations around you, or conditions, or even people. The greater part of your unhappiness is caused by a mental commentary about situations or other people or conditions that you find yourself in. If such a fundamental truth about the origin of unhappiness, such a fundamental truth, nobody teaches that at schools. That would be the most important thing for anybody to learn, and such a simple thing, because anybody can verify it in their own experience immediately. The moment they become upset, the moment you become unhappy, says, that's to do with my reaction, and my reaction is what my mind is commenting. What is it? And the confusion of mistaking your mental commentary for reality is a very serious mental illness. So you cannot say that here's the situation, here's what I'm saying about the situation. And then once you have a mental commentary, you experience emotions that reflect what your mind is saying. And then once this happens and you realize, then you realize As the Buddha said, I teach suffering and the end of suffering, which means I show you how suffering arises and I show you how suffering can come to an end. He's talking about psychological suffering, which is a huge part, the greater part of human suffering. Really, all suffering is psychological. That is just pain, physical discomfort. That, of course, exists. Unhappiness is mind-made. So the little thing once you realize that, and this is something perhaps that you could tell your relatives or family members or friends who are not open to anything so-called spiritual. At some point, you might be able to mention something when they get upset. You have to be careful with how you do it. Choose the right moment, or you better to tell them what you realize. Don't tell them you should do this or you should do that. Give them a little story about what happened to you when you were getting upset about something and what you suddenly realized. And when you dropped your mental commentary about the situation was actually okay as it was. So little stories can sometimes be better than telling a person that they should change something that they are doing. And of course that implies something very deep. Once you realize this truth, it implies that gradually you relinquish unnecessary commentaries as you go through your daily life. Gradually, you let go of adding unnecessary mental commentaries to what's going on around you. And suddenly there's a total shift in how you experience life. Without the, as I sometimes call it, without the excess baggage of ultimately dysfunctional mental commentaries that make the life of millions of people on the planet miserable. I know that pain exists on a physical level, but there's a huge amount of suffering in humans everywhere, in all cultures. It does not have to be like that. So the implications are vast. At first you recognize, yes, it's just a mental commentary as you're standing in the line up at the supermarket and you got irritated, and then you notice irritation is a form of unhappiness, a minor form of unhappiness. Why am I unhappy? I'm unhappy because I don't want to be standing here and waiting for so long. I'm unhappy because these people are so inefficient and they haven't been trained properly. That's why I'm unhappy. I'm unhappy because I don't want to be doing my shopping after a day's work. Why should I have to do that? That's why I'm unhappy. I'm unhappy because there's not enough time now for me to get home and do the cooking. There's not enough. I'm unhappy because I'd rather be somewhere else, relaxing than standing here in this awful place, surrounded by these dreadful people. That's why I'm unhappy. It all sounds so plausible. And yet you have mixed up mental stuff with the simplicity of a situation of standing somewhere in the vertical position and looking around and breathing. What is wrong with this moment? I'm standing here, I'm breathing, and I'm looking around at the people and the things and the stuff. It's full of good things that you can buy. You don't have to go out hunting and stuff like that. I'm looking at all this magnificence of stuff. What's wrong with it? And I'm standing here and, okay, I wish I could stand here for a little longer. you're no longer confusing mental stuff with the actual situation. And when you realize life then flows with much greater ease when you relinquish these unnecessary and absurd commentaries, that also means the amount of thinking that you do as you go through your daily life diminishes somewhat, because a lot of the overthinking that people do is of the complaining negative kind, where they have negative commentaries about things that are happening in their lives. That contributes an enormous amount to the overthinking that people do. Overthinking means an excessive amount of thinking that fulfills no purpose except to strengthen a false sense of self by strengthening the illusion of separation between yourself and the rest of the world, between yourself and others, but otherwise fulfills no useful purpose except to strengthen your ego and to make you more unhappy. And by making you more unhappy, strengthening your ego. Because the greatest egos are unhappy. The more unhappy you are, the bigger the ego. Happy egos find it difficult to survive. So the happiness in the presence of the ego, in the presence of happiness, feels threatened. And the ego, therefore, cannot tolerate happiness for very long. And if the ego is put in the unfortunate position where everything is so nice around for a little while, that what possible cause could I have to be unhappy in this situation? It will come up with some mental stuff. It will project another situation that's going to happen, that's going to make me unhappy. Or it will project an end to this situation. It might project even just a story in your mind where you're arguing with somebody. And so it will always find the unhappiness that it needs to survive. In particular situations, you may lose awareness and regress to total identification with some reactive pattern. And it could be the pain body. A hugely problematic area for many or most people is relationships of whatever kind or on whatever level. It's where people seek their happiness, and it's where many people find their unhappiness. And so I'm talking about both intimate relationships, somebody you live with, and I'm talking about other kinds of relationship also, at work, other family members, relatives, friends, and even very brief relationships, because any interaction with another human being I'm using now relationship in a wider sense, any interaction with another human being is a relationship. You are relating to that person. And so it is, for many people, most of their, or a large part of their suffering or unhappiness, unfortunately, is derived from relationships. They tend to go wrong so often, or present so many problems and obstacles. And it seems that human beings are just so terribly difficult, except one, the one who is listening to these words. You remember the statement, know thyself, famous words of wisdom. Knowing yourself, there are two levels to knowing yourself. One is the level of mental, emotional, and reactive patterns that you display in your life, and the ability to be aware of them. That is one level of self-knowledge, of knowing yourself. That is the kind of thing that sometimes in good therapy sessions, if you have a good, aware therapist, can be helpful to become aware of that level in yourself so that you know what your predominant patterns are. Doesn't everybody know what their patterns? No. They are so identified with their patterns that there's no awareness left. And that usually means when a person is so unconscious, that unconscious, the definition of unconscious, the way we use it here in a spiritual sense, not in a clinical sense, I'm not talking about unconscious, but in a spiritual sense, unconscious is to be totally identified with thoughts and emotions. So there's no room for any awareness left. So you are in the grip of the thought, in the grip of the emotion, and often thoughts and emotions are linked, go together. They have you in their grip so that they basically, you are them, you are the emotion. And those people who are so unconscious, there are still millions around, you might have noticed. Often they have a tendency of seeking always there's always the people are always to be blamed out there. There's always people, they point their fingers at why these people are so bad and what they're doing to you or how awful they are. There's never looking at oneself. Jesus already had that statement. Why do you see what is the saying about what? Yeah, you see a little splinter in the other person's eye, but you don't see the huge splinter that is in your eye. Very profound statement. So why don't you find that first, he says. So in other words, he says, know thyself. Be aware of your own patterns. And most people here have that awareness, but perhaps not all the time. For many of you, when you are challenged in a particular way, in particular situations, you may lose awareness and regress to total identification with some reactive pattern. And it could be the pain body. As you know, the pain body is old accumulated emotion that still I regard it as an almost autonomous entity that lives in you. It's a way of looking at it, but there's a lot of truth to this. There's an emotional field that lives in you almost as an entity, one could say. That sounds slightly spooky, but one could say that even a thought is an entity. When you think a thought, it is an energy formation. It is a little being that you give birth to. So it has a life. It depends for its life. It depends on you, on your life. but it is a little entity, and so in some forms of either deep unconsciousness or when mental illness, sometimes it can happen that the mind gets completely taken over by these little thought entities. And so you're totally occupied. Your mind is totally occupied. Another word for occupied is, I won't say it, it sounds too spooky. So you're totally occupied by these thoughts, and they pretend to be you. So that is total lack of awareness. So it's essential for your spiritual growth to be continuously alert and vigilant, so that you are able to be there in the background, so to speak, as the awareness in your daily life, so that you're not completely taken over by the arising thoughts and arising emotions. When you interact with people, when you become upset about this or that, always any kind of upset or disturbance in your energy field can be very helpful. Do not believe that I shouldn't have this disturbance in my energy field, or I shouldn't be upset because I'm spiritual. I don't get upset about these things anymore. But we honestly observe what arises, and then observe how does it arise. And as I already mentioned last night, very often you will find it is caused by certain thoughts in your mind, certain interpretations, certain reactions. It can also happen that a reaction comes so suddenly that it's just an emotion waiting to come up. An emotion, and this is what the pain body does, as you may know. The pain body is not necessarily always active in you. There are periods when the old emotional pain that you still carry around with you, is dormant, and then it leaves you in peace for a while, and then you are fine. You meet somebody, and this person is lovely, and it all goes fine, and you might spend some time together, and it's still fine, and then you go on vacation together for the first time. And then there comes a moment when something else comes in that's not fine, either in you or through the other. And what happens in relationships? The pain body periodically needs to feed on a certain experience that corresponds to its energy field. The vibrational frequency of its energy field is a good external image of the pain body in, I think it's in Lord of the Rings, is this little being, I can't remember the name, goes and even the little being once was a normal being, according to the legend in this. It's kind of modern mythology. That being was once a normal, lovely human, and there is still, although this being has been completely taken over by what I call the pain body. Occasionally, there are still instances when the original being that's been completely taken over still shines through, and there's a little bit of tiny glimmers of awareness come in occasionally, and then you almost feel sorry for it. But then again, the pain body, and if you feel sorry and you give in, then immediately the pain body will take advantage of that. So that's a lovely modern mythological illustration of the pain body. So to observe that in yourself, in relationships, how it periodically comes up either in your partner or in yourself, wanting some kind of drama, amplifying something little into something big, because it wants to feed on your partner's reaction. It wants the emotional negativity, it needs the emotional negativity from the other in order to suck it up. And then you give back of it to the other. The pain body, then mutually they energize each other. And that is unconscious. That is how couples, many couples, most couples perhaps, unless there's already considerable consciousness there in both of them, or at least one of them, they go through that periodically, don't realize that that is what it is. And at first there are even people who feel they need that drama to feel that the relationship is still real. And that is, there comes a point when it gets too much. So then the pain that arises so often and so frequently, it gets too much. I can't live with this person anymore. And then you separate. But if the awareness hasn't come in, so that you can be aware of your own pain body, what you contribute to it, then you will repeat the same thing in the next relationship. So the pain body needs to re-experience emotional pain through drama. And whoever it comes up first in, it is usually it's always recognizable by being an overreaction to something, an event, something you said, something you did, or something you failed to say, or you failed to do. But the person who is displaying the pain body does not know it's an overreaction. So only an outside observer or the other might see that it's an overreaction, but to the pain body it seems a totally natural reaction. So you need to know what situations, there may be certain situations in your life that tend to trigger the pain body in your relationship or at work. There may be certain people that your pain body is susceptible to, resonates with. If you live alone, then the pain body has a little problem. What am I going to feed on? I can't have drama with myself, or can I? Yes, you can. You can have the drama in your mind. You can have a stream of destructive and negative thoughts in your mind, either about yourself or others. They may not be here, but you have the thoughts about them. They may be in your past. They may be dead. But the pain body, if there's nobody around that the pain body can feed on through negative emotion, it will feed on negative thought streams, your thought streams. And this is where the addiction to negative thinking comes from.
As we search to focus on our true self, our true I, and we look at the various types of attachments, status, materialism, body image, I specifically have a problem with letting go of the concept of relationship and roles, and specifically the role of mother. And although I see the agonic risk in hanging on to the role of mother and have no problem with the challenge of trying to let go of that. It's the concept of letting go of and having motivation to let go of the bond between mother and child that I struggle with.
How old is your child?
My children are adults. I have 2 living and 1 that I have buried. So I embrace and fully accept the opportunity that they all may go at any time. It's not that. But I'm talking about the emotional bond. So I'd like your comment on how we accept and embrace the concept of a letting go of the emotional bond.
Can I ask, oh, stay there. Can I ask you whether you have fully grieved the one that you have lost?
I feel that we have. It's been 30 years, and my belief in the spirituality that we speak of has assisted me in incorporating that into our lives.
Are you afraid your other children may die before you pass?
No, I have no fear of that. I have no fear of death for any of us.
Okay. But you have a fear of letting go.
I have no motivation to let go of the attachment between any one of the 3, living or dead. I'm asking for your feedback on how to let go of the attachment.
Well, what's coming through is that it's not the bond so much that you have to let go of. It's the mother role to let go of, and begin, when you let go of that, you are able to then begin a new sort of relationship, a more perhaps adult to adult relationship, a friendship to friendship relationship, rather than the mother-daughter, mother-son relationship. Now, usually when we hang on to our roles, it gives the ego a sense of something, gives the mind something. Because after all, we've been mothers for a very long time. But there comes a point where if you don't let go, then a new relationship cannot form, a different type of relationship, a more adult relationship. Because mother relationship, let's face it, mothers, concept of mother could be, telling your child what to do or having your child being able to come to you. But if we don't let go of that, the result then for your child is also not being able to be fully themselves. And you know that because you're shaking your head. And in turn, you are not able to be fully yourself. So, do you want to be fully yourself?
Of course.
Then let go.
So am I understanding correctly that letting go of the attachment of roles in relationships is not literally letting go of valuing that, but rather letting go of that identifying you?
Exactly. When we have an expectation of something, so when I realized in my relationship with Eckhart early on, I had a lot of expectations. A lot of expectations. Things that I didn't want in a relationship anymore, things that I wanted in a relationship, and he's like, So, when I suddenly saw that, oh my God, it was like this aha moment, oh my God, I'm not having a real relationship with my man here. I'm having a relationship with an idea in my head. So you won't be able to have a full relationship with your children until you let go of the role. Because you don't need to be a mother anymore. They're not little. So, but mothers are okay. They're wonderful. But when they get to be, like older, it's no longer wonderful. It blocks them from growing and being who they are, and blocks you from growing and being who you are. The question is, are you willing to discover who you really are? And have them discover who they really are, and see them who they really are.
Thank you for the clarification.
Great.
And if you live in a false identity, a conceptual identity that you allow the world to tell you who you are, you allow the world to determine your worth, so you've stopped thinking, the ripple has stopped thinking, and in that at first there is a strange. I'm not thinking about who I am or my problems, and yet what is left here is just a presence. And that means the ripple is becoming aware of a transcendent dimension that is deep. And that is the awakening of the ripple. And that is actually the main purpose of your life, is to become aware of that, because that is the awakening of the human species. And the human species is only one manifestation of the consciousness of the universe, manifesting here as the human species. I'm sure there are others on other planets or galaxies who are also awakening. And your purpose is that you may sometimes question whether your life, there's this weird notion of how do you judge your life so far? A success, a failure, something in between. And of course, it's nice to achieve something in this world, to create this or that. But it cannot tell you who you are. It always leaves a sense of lack ultimately behind, even if you can hang on to it until finally you die. And you have to let go, or it leaves you. Either you leave it or it leaves you, whatever it is. It leaves you or you leave it. And many things leave you before you die. Achievements too, especially in the age of reputation, can leave you, especially in the age of Twitter. One wrong tweet and your entire life is destroyed. And if you live in a false identity, a conceptual identity that you allow the world to tell you who you are. You allow the world to determine your worth. You look to the world and other people to tell you that you are good. And if you allow the world to tell you that, then it's ultimately you're trapped in a conceptual identity. That's me. And that can be destroyed. In the past, you had to do a little bit more to destroy your reputation. But nowadays, it's so easy. Just tweet something that and suddenly the hive mind will pounce on you. And you have to say, I'm sorry, I'm just... And you can't show your face in public again anywhere. Exaggerating only slightly. But that's all it's so fragile because it's a fictitious sense of self. It's a surface I. But to lose your reputation, or to lose your possessions, or to lose your position, is a wonderful opportunity for realizing who you are beyond your position and your possession and your achievements. Some people need that. It's a blessing for them to lose. Not everybody needs it, but many people need to lose some things very significant in their lives in order to bring about, to initiate the awakening process. And retrospectively, many humans look back, they're really grateful that they lost this, which they regarded as irreplaceable and extremely valuable. And with that loss, they lost the most important part of their identity. Was a fiction anyway, but they didn't know that. And that led to suffering, of course. So the loss of fictitious identity, which can happen to anybody, and to some people it doesn't happen until they retire. So maybe they had a particular job, this title, and suddenly you pack your bags and you look forward to, okay, now I can start living, but then suddenly you realize you're nobody any beyond your job description and your function that you fulfilled for decades, perhaps an important function, member of the board. And suddenly you're not a member of the board, you're just bored. But you had been looking forward to the golfing, or there's a lot of golfing around here. Nothing against golf, can be wonderful meditation, but you'd been looking forward to the golfing or whatever it is. You were now retired and I can start living. And you do some golfing and then you sit there and then you do a bit more golf or whatever it is. But who are you suddenly? You don't get these phone calls anymore, only very occasionally. And that this great sense of something missing arises. Oh, what is this? I'm nobody suddenly. Yeah, because your entire life, your entire identity was built upon a fiction, a conceptual edifice in your head, and everybody else confirmed its truthfulness, but it wasn't. So the loss can be a great help. Most of you are not in desperate need of a huge loss, although it might happen. The universe gives you what you need because you have already voluntarily come here. You have voluntarily embarked upon a course of, to put it in blunt and somewhat scary terms, a course of self-annihilation. but it was only the surface self. There was nothing real there. So when you, for example, when you now, especially now during the 6 months, when your practice is your inner state, the practice is becoming familiar with awareness, allowing awareness into your life, realizing that nothing is more important than that, and then the most important thing is you discover your ability to refrain from thinking. It doesn't have to be long at first, just not just when you're meditating, say, okay, now I'm going to do a meditation. That's fine, it's good. But there's much more to it. To refrain from thinking in ordinary situations when thinking is not required. Simple thing like looking at flowers, looking at around the room. Do you have to think while you look around the room? Or can you look around the room without thinking? And who is looking when you're not thinking? Is the person looking when you have no labels for your perception? Or when you're listening to a bird, or the sound of the ocean, or the sound of rain, which may be coming tomorrow? When you're listening to that, and you're not labeling it mentally, you're not saying anything about it, but there's an alert listening. Who is listening? Are you then a person with a history and so on that's listening? Or is there a deeper I that has emerged and the sensory perception is happening against the background of or within the space of that deep I? So in that sense, you could say the universe is listening to itself. And let's say there's the bird song, or there is the crashing of the waves, or there's the sound of the rain. And suddenly, that listening is an enormous addition to the universe. The universe is awakening to itself, its own depth, its own beauty, through you. But you can only fulfill that function, as part of the totality, the function of the awakening universe, if you're not excessively burdened and excessively trapped in your personalized sense of self. And because otherwise you carry the burden of yourself, the surface self, the little self, but the little self can feel very huge. It occupies your entire mental and emotional space. And it thinks about itself, and it talks about itself, and it worries about itself. I am the most important thing in the universe. Here's me and the rest of the universe. Oh dear. And now how do you become free of, how do you step out of this being the trap, the prison of the self, as the Buddha just called it, the self. Jesus also called it the self. It's not a very well known fact because they don't understand it in the churches, most of them. Some may do, but they don't understand when he said, deny yourself. Jesus said, deny yourself. Deny thyself in the old translation. Meaning, obviously, you're not supposed to deny something that is real. The implication when Jesus says deny thyself is obviously that the self is not real. Why would he ask you to deny something that is real? Would not make sense. And so the Buddha, of course, always pointed to the fictitious nature of the self. Buddha said self is an illusion. And as long as you are trapped, I'm paraphrasing the Buddha now, as long as you are trapped in the illusion of the self, you will encounter dukkha, translated as suffering, sometimes translated as misery or translated as unhappiness. Suffering, misery, unhappiness, unsatisfactoriness. When you are trapped in that ultimately illusory self, you continuously generate dukkha, which is from the Pali language, which is related to Sanskrit, meaning suffering, unhappiness, unsatisfactoriness. And wherever you go, whatever situation you go into, whatever relationship you go into, whatever place you go to, whatever attainment, whatever you attain or achieve or get, there's always, sooner or later, and usually sooner, you will encounter the element of dukkha. In other words, it gets tainted with unhappiness. And so the Buddha, that was the teaching of the Buddha, said wherever you go, you'll find dukkha. But why? Because you take something that you are not to be real and ultimately who you are. And so that felt is a fiction. So, and therefore Jesus said, deny thyself, meaning not deny the reality of yourself, meaning recognize the unreality of yourself. That's the significant meaning of deny thyself. Recognize the unreality. That is a denial of the self. How do I deal with being impatient with myself? Because after having a spiritually unconscious episode, I realize that with all the tools you have given us, I should know better by now. Interesting, uses the word tools, so and I use the word key. Well, a spiritually unconscious episode, and then when it's over, you suddenly realize, oh, I forgot to apply the tool, or let's use the word key again. I left the key in my pocket again. Well, at least you know it now that you left the key, and at that moment you've taken the key out, because you've taken the key of awareness out of your pocket, that suddenly you realize you had lost it. You had lost the awareness, or not lost it, but you didn't remember that you had the key in your pocket. And then it's over, and it's, oh yeah, there's the key. And then again you lose the key when the thought arises, you should know better by now, shouldn't you? What's the point? You can't do it, you see? Even after years, you can't do it. What's the point? You know, these are the thoughts that go through the head, which means the key is left in your pocket again. Then you take it out again and realize, okay, at least I'm present now. You don't need... Whoever you are judging through your mind is a fiction anyway. It's unconscious pattern that has arisen in you, and you make it into some kind of me identity. It's a fiction. Of course, that only happens when you again put the key back in your pocket. So you continue to apply the key, and then it's okay, at least now, there's awareness now, that's enough. It's always enough for now. All you ever need to be responsible for is the present moment, and that's all you need. And then you don't make it into another problem. The fact that you had lost it or not used it doesn't become a problem, which is another episode of unawareness if you make a problem out of it. Your identity is not there. Your identity is present, and it's present now. Your identity, you are here, awake now. And then next time, perhaps it happens again. And then real progress is there when in the middle of it you realize you lost it. You're in an old mind reaction, a negative reaction. And then you can choose to take the key out of your pocket and apply it, open the door to awareness, and the shift happens. And you're no longer reactive. So I recommend that you are very alert to see what kind of energy you're putting out into the world. Is it tinged with negativity, in which case you are mind identified, ego identified? And once you notice it, then you can apply the key. So all self-condemnation is not helpful. It's part of the unconscious patterns. Impatient with yourself. We are dealing with collective, these are not personal problems of yours. We are dealing with collective mind patterns that have been around for thousands of years, that each individual inherits. So it is a monumental thing that's happening now, that more and more humans are able to evolve beyond the inherited collective mind patterns, but they're still very strong. They have an enormous pull still. It would be silly to deny that the pull is still very strong. So it's not a personal problem of yours. It's an evolutionary transition, misperceived as a personal problem. Remember, mentioned at the beginning the famous dictum, know thyself. Now, here we have the two different kinds of knowing. You can know yourself conceptually, which you do. For example, when you visit a psychoanalyst, the psychoanalyst will analyze your past and he will talk about it, and you'll be encouraged to explore more and more of the things that happened. And it can go on for years. It's interesting, very interesting. That's knowing yourself, but it's not the way in which the Greek philosopher meant it. That can be helpful because often it shows you where you are trapped. It shows you what the obstacles are. Can be helpful. But knowing yourself in the deeper sense is the other kind, which is knowing yourself as the aware presence, in which there's no conceptualization, because that is the essence of who you are. And then there are basically, you exist in the two dimensions. You exist as a person, physical body, psychological form, physical form, psychological form. You have a history as a person, and you have a future, and as a person you live in time on that speeding train, and undoubtedly as a person you are already being consumed by the fire of time, and the speeding train is speeding up more and more. And then you are there as the deeper, the essence of who you are is awareness or consciousness, which is not yours. You are a manifestation of it. It manifests through you. It is the ray that emanates from the source, and that's why you are incredibly deep when you realize your own consciousness, which is not your own, I just say it, then you realize how deep you are. I believe Ralph Waldo Emerson had some, I'm not good at quoting, but he had something, the essence of who you are is like a wick, like a candle, the wick of a candle that is deeply goes into being. You are rooted in this beingness that far transcends the person, that connects you to the totality of all life. And that is known in the non-conceptual knowing of yourself. And the non-conceptual knowing of yourself is presence, awareness, the ability to rise above thinking, not continuously, but then you can use thinking, and actually the presence or the awareness can operate through you and actually use your mind in wonderful ways, so that you can co-create with the universe, you can create things. But that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is realizing it first. You realize that, and then you're no longer trapped in your conditioned mind. But the mind can still operate. It still does. You exist as a person, and you realize who you are beyond the person. That's the end of the ego. That the end of ego doesn't mean it's the end of you as a form identity. You can still operate as a normal, so-called normal human being, but not really normal anymore, because normal is insane. But you don't have to become weird when you realize who you are. You just become very natural, and you still give conventional answers. When people say, when were you born? You give your birthday and your year. You don't necessarily say, I was never born. I am nobody. Who are you? The ego can still, you have to still, even when you realize that the awareness that you are, the ego can come in still and claim something. I'm more present than you. Nobody has less ego than me. I hope they don't put this statement of mine on a little, very short YouTube clip. Invite into your life that aware presence in daily life. And especially when you're getting unhappy in whatever form, that's always a signal. Something, unhappiness, I'm using this generic term again, in whatever form. And remember, even a slight irritation is unhappiness. Anger is unhappiness, although the ego loves it. The body suffers when you're actually angry. Any of those things, notice, okay, it means, okay, it's arising. I have lost. The easiest way of looking at it is, say, I must have lost the present moment. And when you realize that you've lost the present moment, because the present moment is presence, when you become aware of the present moment, your problems dissolve. Not that you deny your ability to cope with problems, so-called problems, which are challenges, increases when you no longer make these challenges into a problematic sense of self. Always coming back to the present moment. Return to the present moment, because that's all there ever is. We talked about time. Time seems to be the fire that consumes us all, but on the other hand, this is very paradoxical, and I just want to explain it on a practical level, not on a philosophical level, and not on a scientific level. Don't want to talk about Albert Einstein's theory of relativity of time, but even more practical. The weird thing is, time seems to be consuming your life, and yet you never actually experience time, except as thought in your head. But you have to, is this statement true? You have to see in your own life. Is it true when I say you never actually experience time except as a thought in your head? Because all your past lives as thought, all your future, which are projections from the past, live as thought. If you remove thought and you're just aware, there's no time anymore. There's only the present moment ever. And now, although you're being consumed by time, the physical vehicle, the strange thing is, it's always the present moment. And people have this burden of past, but it's thought. And if you step into the present moment, you immediately step out of thought into awareness. And that can you can make that into a habit, especially when thought causes you suffering or unhappiness. And most of suffering or unhappiness is caused by thought. When thought causes you suffering or unhappiness, say, okay, just hang on. Do I want to suffer? Do I want to be unhappy? You can do it in a simple thing. Let's say you have an argument with your partner and you need to be right. And suddenly you realize what you're engaged in being right. And you realize it's meaningless whether you or he or she is right. And then you let go. But be aware of ego, not in the sense that, okay, I'm so conscious, I'm letting go now of this. You can carry on without me. You let go of defending your mental position. You let go of identifying with your mental position. Just, okay, yeah, maybe, okay, it's fine, yeah. And of course, immediately the whole thing collapses without an opposition. So you can observe how unhappiness arises and then ask, do I want to be? How can I not be? And then you step out and you step into the present now. But your happiness or fulfillment does not depend on any other human's acceptance of who you are. That would be a deluded thought. It sometimes happens that members of the same family evolve at very different rates, so that a sense of separation can come if one member of the family evolves spiritually much more rapidly than another. And that is something that you cannot do anything about. You need to accept that your sisters, their viewpoints and their judgments of you arise because of the way in which they have been conditioned by their culture. So this is part of the mental conditioning. There's nothing really personal about it. They have been conditioned in a certain way. To some extent, you have gone beyond your conditioning, because anybody who begins to awaken spiritually goes beyond, also simultaneously begins to go beyond their cultural conditioning. And that applies whether you're from Somalia, whether you're from Australia, or whether you're from the United States or anywhere. If you are not awakening spiritually, your behavior, your viewpoints, your opinions, the way in which you judge other people, the way in which you judge other cultures, all that is conditioned by the content of your mind, the culture and family and so on that you grew up in. So you are basically a conditioned entity. And your opinions and viewpoints are not really yours, they are the product of your conditioning. And so that's the case with your sisters. So sometimes the same thing applies to close friends. I've had many similar questions of people who had a close friendship with someone, and sometimes it's the case with husband and wife. Often I've had in many cases, one of them, either she or he, began to evolve and awaken spiritually, and a gap suddenly arose between the one that was still totally conditioned and the one that was beginning to awaken spiritually. In some cases they can still live together. It depends on the nature and degree of the person who is not yet awakening spiritually. It depends that the ways in which this non-awakened state manifests differs from person to person. Some you can live with, you can awaken, and you know your partner is not, and you can totally surrender to that fact that your partner is not awakening yet. In other cases, it will create a hostility, a growing hostility in your partner. The ego objects to the other becoming so different and changing. They don't understand you anymore, and then a separation happens. With husband and wife, then it sometimes happens that they do that different ways. In the case of a family member, there's a link that remains, so you cannot just say we go our different ways. There's always a certain bond between you and your family members. But the first thing is, you ask me what I would do. What I would do is, first of all, understand why, and this is what I've just been talking about. If you understand, then already it is a helpful thing. If you don't understand why is this happening, but if you understand that these people act out of your sisters act out of their conditioning, you have begun, already are in the process of transcending your conditioning. Whether or not they will also awaken or begin to awaken spiritually, we don't know. So in the meantime, all you can do, or all I could, if I were you, all I could do was continue to recognize the limitation in them. It is, they are conditioned in their responses. Recognize that is what happened, not to blame them for it, not to feel guilty because you make them angry, because you don't. It's their conditioning that makes them angry. So you don't feel guilty because you are different from them. I wouldn't. I'm talking now about I would not feel guilty. I would simply recognize compassionately what it is that makes them say and do the things they say and do towards you. And you cannot even explain to them. It would be futile to say to them, I know why you're saying that to me, because you're totally conditioned. What? They wouldn't know what you're talking about, because they know nothing outside of their conditioning. So compassion arises, compassion and acceptance of a person's limitations. You can still hold them in your heart and realize there is an essence in them that is lovable, and you can continue to be connected to that essence of who they are If they refuse to talk to you, then you have to accept and surrender that. You can hold them in your meditation. You can even sometimes look at their photo, look beyond the surface appearance of who they are, and the photo can be a little help to establish the inner connection. Then you don't need the photo anymore. To establish the inner connection, feel the inner connection with their innermost selves, and even if they don't talk to you, that can still be there. And then you send, in the conventional New Age language, you send loving energy to them. There's some truth in that. So there's a loving, still a loving connection, even though you don't talk. So recognition, to summarize, recognition of why this is happening, accepting your family members' limitations, and not judging them. They judge you, of course, because their judgments of you are part of their conditioning. But you don't need to judge them. You simply see that this is a limitation of their state of consciousness at this present time. They will awaken too, in time, eventually, this lifetime or the next. So then you can begin to feel peaceful about it, so that it does not become a source of suffering, continuous source of suffering at the back of your mind. So if you can be in a loving relationship, even though you might not meet them much anymore or at all, you can stay in a state of love towards them, compassionately accept their limitations, and then see what happens. Sometimes in that way a healing does happen. It may be that at some point there's a crack in their conditioning and they're suddenly able to accept you, who you are for who you are now. But your happiness or fulfillment does not depend on any other human's acceptance of who you are. That would be a deluded thought. If you think you can only be happy if these people accept and understand you. Some people have that with their parents. So they say, my dad, my father, they don't understand me at all. It's terrible, terrible. I'm trying to explain what I'm at. Of course, they cannot understand you. It's beyond their comprehension if you have awakened spiritually and they haven't. So compassionately accept that they cannot understand you. Instead of trying to explain yourself to them, just be there in a loving way with them when you meet for Christmas or Thanksgiving and you hear all the judgments coming at you from them. You should have, why don't you? Look where it's taken you. Look at your sister, she married a millionaire, and you and you are into that weird kind of meditation stuff that's not getting you anywhere. Whatever judgments come, say, okay, I know that this is what you think and feel, and I think and feel differently, that's all. So you don't need to justify or accepting people's limitations and suddenly realizing whether or not your father, your mother, your sister, your brother, or anybody else close to you accepts you for who you are, is really not. You become free of the need to be accepted, but you can nevertheless have a deeper connection, keep that deeper connection and connectedness with them. So it's when the surface, your surface reality becomes frustrating, that's the beginning of potentially finding the portal into the awakened state. But when your surface reality is relatively pleasant, by the way, it doesn't stay like that, but for the time being, let's say it's relatively pleasant, you're not really motivated into finding the deeper essence of who you are, because why not let's fly to Paris. We'll have a great meal there, where you feel a little bit uncomfortable and discontent. Okay, let's go there. Let's do this. Let's try this. More sensory experience. You can buy any sensory experience. And then after a while you'll find being in your comfort zone after a while becomes your discomfort zone. And then finally you've made it. And then finally there's a possibility of awakening. And so this is the challenges that we encounter in life. Many people have an attitude of resentment or a feeling that there's something very wrong with the world or there's something very wrong with my life when they're being challenged by difficult situations, difficult people, loss of some kind. Did I mention difficult people? Oh, yes. You may find a lot of your suffering, unhappiness, strangely enough, comes from other people. They are so difficult. And often the very people that were supposed to make you happy, suddenly they don't fulfill their purpose anymore and they make you unhappy. It's called the divorce court. And there's an implied belief that this shouldn't be happening. Life should unfold beautifully without all that stuff going wrong. And to some extent, yes. To some extent, especially as you live more consciously and no longer totally in the grip of ego, you're beginning to awaken, there's an awareness, you no longer create unnecessary suffering in your mind through reactivity, you're able to drop the unnecessary baggage of creating narratives and creating your own suffering through your narratives, you let go of that, so it's a huge chunks of suffering begin to fall away. But challenges still come. Even then, and even then, it doesn't mean everything will now go totally as expected and as it should. There's still loss happening from time. You still come across difficult people. How is that? I don't want any more difficult. Yeah, but they're everywhere. As the famous French philosopher said, hell is other people. He looked very unhappy, by the way. Well, the only photo I ever saw of him, he looked unhappy, so I don't know. Jean-Paul Sartre. It's true, other people are difficult. So your life improves immeasurably as you become more conscious, but it will still challenge you. And it won't mean you will never experience loss again. It doesn't mean things may not go wrong still occasionally, not perhaps as drastically as before. You don't create your own mayhem and chaos anymore. But challenges, yes, different kinds of challenges come. And if you no longer complain that a challenge shouldn't exist, difficulties shouldn't exist, obstacles shouldn't exist, things should not be cancelled, they shouldn't go wrong. If you drop that expectation, then it's actually fine. But be careful that if you still have an unspoken assumption that there's something wrong when challenges happen, that would draw you back into unhappiness. There's nothing wrong when challenges happen. We grow through them. And if you hadn't had yours, you wouldn't be here. If I hadn't had mine, I wouldn't be here, so we wouldn't be here. We would not be here without it. And so retrospectively, we can actually be grateful for the suffering that we've had, retrospectively. The question is, the challenges of life, when they come, do we transform them into unhappiness, or are we able to just face them and then go with them and do whatever action is possible or necessary, or totally accept that at this moment, this is how it is. So when you live more consciously, you no longer convert the difficulties of life, the inevitable difficulties and challenges of life, you no longer convert them into unhappiness, which means they don't contribute anymore to your unhappy person identity. You're no longer becoming a more unhappy person. You'll be surprised how many people's main sense of identity in this world is unhappiness. And they're just looking for the next thing to be unhappy about. And they always find something, or to complain about, to be angry about. There's an expression that then you become a grievance looking for a cause. And of course, you always find the causes. So, important thing then to realize that I'm sure there are some of you who have carried the burden of a very unhappy self for many years, and perhaps you're just beginning to step out of it, you're just perhaps beginning to transcend it, and there are still millions in this world who carry the burden of an unhappy narrative in their minds, unhappy self. And that means you think about then my life. Why did it come to this? Why didn't my expectations that I had when I was 20, why didn't they work out? Why did my marriage collapse? Why did I lose that job? Why did I succeed and made millions and then I lost them? Why? Why did I work for nothing for 15 years and then the whole thing that I built up collapsed? Why? So dreadful, dreadful. All this begins to dissolve because you realize you're unconsciously creating suffering and strengthening the egoic personality through that. And then my life then is just memories. And you begin to realize, as I sometimes put it, or people find it a little weird, when I say, my life isn't a correct way of putting it, because you don't have a life. You don't have a life. Because if you have a life, there's you and life. How can you be separate from life? So, if you don't have a life, one could even say you can't even lose your life. You can only lose something that you have, but you are life, you don't have a life. I am life and consciousness are synonymous. It doesn't mean that every form of life is conscious, but every form of life is the way I see it is matter, the table, a rock, mineral, it's like frozen consciousness. Plant life is like liquid consciousness. It's an analogy. And the mind and thinking, and beyond that, consciousness itself is like vapor, mist, it rises. This is a water analogy. All life is manifestation of the one underlying life or consciousness in manifold forms. So you are that. I am life is a wonderful realization. I am consciousness. I don't have a life. Yes, I have a history, but the history is not my life. It's stuff. It's stuff in the mind. It's memories. And all these things are wonderful that they happen to you because they have brought about your awakening. They all make sense if you now look back on all the things that happened, including, and not only including, but especially the so-called bad things. They brought you to this point. They pushed you into awakening. There's a very strong pattern in me that doesn't want to live anymore, and that is really hard to deal with. Can you please advise me? Well, first you need to observe whether there's negativity in there. It is like, I can't take any more of this, or whatever thought comes up when you feel that you don't want to live anymore, can't take it anymore, I've had enough. In other words, is it a resistance pattern that's still egoic? Because things are not going the way you wanted them to go? Or there may be a kind of tiredness of life, sense-perceived existence, situations, and so on. A weariness, perhaps. You are not here, so I cannot ask you to explain exactly what it is that you feel and how you experience that not wanting to live anymore. But anybody, no matter what it is, I suggest that you practice dying. By surrendering completely to the present moment. Don't demand that this moment should be different. It is the way it is. Then the ego dies. Instead of committing suicide, I highly recommend surrender. Much more effective. Die before you die. Do situations still have the power to induce in you negativity? Do situations still have the power to make you unhappy? Events, situations, people. Is that why you want to not live anymore? That's not surrender. Try surrender and see what happens. Which means no complaint about anything anymore. Mental. Complete acceptance of this moment as it is. And even the thought, I don't want this anymore, whatever, is a resistance to what is. You don't need it. So if you feel the pull of death, die now to the mind-made self, the ego. Allow the ego to die. Complete surrender to what is. And see what happens. You may suddenly find the peace that passes all understanding. It means you've died. The ego is dissolved.